if they can get away with it once, maybe they could get away with it a second time on an even larger scale using the largest nuclear power plant in all of Europe. According to the Russian government, and this is after the Ukrainian government, and I've already done a video about this on my second channel, DylanBurnsLIVE, after the Ukrainian government has given warning after warning after warning, stating that the Russian government is going to rig the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant with explosives. In fact, the chief of Ukraine's intelligence bureau, Abudanyev, I'm sorry, I always pronounce his name incorrectly, but he stated that they've already rigged the power plant to explode, and that they're now calling for a lot of the staff there to evacuate, hopefully towards Crimea, according to the, like, that's the Russian authority who what they would want the staff to go to, because they want them to go into occupied territory, not back into the rest of Ukraine, and that they're pulling back soldiers. And as the Ukrainian government warns of this threat more and more and more, and alarm within Ukraine continues to rise over the concern of there being a incident at the nuclear power plant and there possibly being a nuclear disaster. And this isn't the first time we've had incidents at the nuclear power plant, or the threat of incidents. I don't know if many of you guys remember, but in 2022, about a month into the war, when the Russians first took the plant, the whole battle was live streamed, and we saw the Russians firing on the plant and catching it on fire in an effort to capture it from the Ukrainians. And then after capturing it, there's been multiple instances of shelling near the plant, of explosives being planted near the plant. The IAEA, even if they said that they have yet to find any evidence of the plant being rigged to explode, they did say that there was explosives near the plant, and in some places, like in like door frames and near entrances in the building in some locations, even though they said that while that was still dangerous, it was not rigging the power plant to explode. So there's already been a lot of incidents, a lot of concern. I went down to the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant. I didn't enter the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant because it was occupied, but I did film with locals across the river and watch as there were explosions near the power plant. And I saw them during the middle of the night at the start of the Kherson counteroffensive. So explosion after explosion after explosion. So this is not the first time that there's been a threat of something happening. But up until now, one of my main concerns, if not my chief concern, was that there'd be like some stray shell or some stray rocket that gets out of control, hits something, and could start a chain reaction. And while the power plants are a lot safer than what they used to be in Ukraine, for example, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant used RKBM reactors, which are a lot more dangerous than the reactors that they're using now. There's a lot more safety mechanisms in place now. There's, of course, shelling an active nuclear power plant is a dangerous thing to do. That's not a safe thing to do. But now the threat to me, and it's seemingly to the international community, and according to the Ukrainian and Russian governments, now the threat is different. Now the threat, at least according to both governments, is different. While there's always been some concern about this happening, the Ukrainian government's been saying this for months, and the Russian government has been talking about Ukrainian shelling of the plant for months. Now, RBMK reactors are known to not explode and work perfectly. Okay, don't cap at me too much. Don't throw me off course now. Now, it seems that both the Russians and Ukrainians are both saying that imminently, or in the very near future, there's going to be a disaster at the nuclear power plant. The Russians are saying that the Ukrainians are going to drop some radioactive material on the plant, and they're saying that we're going to actually do it tomorrow. So within 24 hours, in the title, I almost put 48 hours, but I actually, that was at the start of the day. Now it's in 24 hours. So the Russians are saying that there's going to be a incident or an accident of some sort set up by the Ukrainians, some attack on the power plant in the next 24 hours. As the Ukrainians have been warning for months that the Russians are preparing to do an attack on the power plant, to do a controlled explosion, a controlled detonation after placing explosives across the facility, because the Russians do occupy the plant, much in the same way that the Ukrainian government accuses the Russians of setting up explosives along the Novokakhovka Dam, which caused an explosion and then massive flooding in the region, causing many Ukrainian civilians, I'm sorry, I'm saying causing over and over and over again, but causing many Ukrainian civilians to drown, mines and other bombs to be moved, and displaced as they become a danger to not only the people in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, but also the people in Odessa and down the way of the river. It has caused many animals to be killed. Some estimates I've seen are as large as 20,000. There's now a health risk because of all the bloated bodies and corpses, industrial spillage, industrial lubricant, massive humanitarian concern. The Ukrainian government continues to say that this was done by the Russians. And the evidence seems to be piling up that it was done by the Russians. With recently, I think it was about a week ago, the New York Times publishing a report with multiple demolition and weapons experts saying that the damage on the Novka Dam, which was created to survive a possible nuclear war, it was created during the Cold War in the 1950s, that the explosion is not correlative with just a natural failure, but somebody rigging it to explode, and that the size of the explosion and how the entirety of the mechanism gave way and was torn apart did not seem to be correlative with a HIMARS explosion, but a massive amount of explosive material that would have had to been placed at points in the bridge that was where it was weakest. So planted explosives. And this was a theory that was not only put forward by experts with the New York Times, but it was actually said on Russian state TV, much to the chagrin of the Russian state TV host, who was asking another demolition expert who they actually somehow got onto Russian state television. They asked him, what's your professional assessment? And he said it had to be planted. And so then the host, sweating, I don't know if anybody has a link to this. If anybody has a link to this interview, I'd love to show it again to just show how much they were in denial. Once he got that response, he responded, well, does this mean the Ukrainians got in, like, swimsuits and they put on goggles and got life breathers and they dove into the water and swim up the river, and then once at the edge of the power plant, they actually, and at the edge of the dam, they planted explosives. And then he started coming up with these wild and crazy theories to try to figure out why the expert that they brought on would say that it was planted explosives, because if it was planted explosives, then it was almost certainly the Russians. Anyway, in the fallout of the lack of a response to that, a lack of a response to what experts say was most likely the Russians planting explosives on the Novka Dam and causing that humanitarian catastrophe, many Ukrainians, including those in the Ukrainian government and just Ukrainians that I've talked to personally, are scared that that could embolden the Russian government to think that they could get away with these types of events, or if done by the Russians and man-made, which all the evidence points to it being a man-made disaster. If they can get away with it once, maybe they could get away with it a second time on an even larger scale using the largest nuclear power plant in all of Europe, which the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant is the largest nuclear power plant within all of Europe. And so that's why a lot of fear exists, that the Russians might think that they can get away with it. And so maybe they'll be bold enough to try. And with the Ukrainian government yelling at the top of their lungs that they're about to do it, and the Russian government saying that the Ukrainians are going to do it and they're going to do it within 24 hours, there's a lot of fear around this right now. So let's read the Reuters article that talks about this. Russia and Ukraine accuse each other of plotting imminent attack on nuclear power plant. Russia and Ukraine on Tuesday accused each other of plotting to stage an attack on the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, long the subject of mutual recriminations and suspicions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he told his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron about Russia's dangerous provocations at the plant in southern and southeastern Ukraine. Russian troops seized the station, Europe's largest nuclear facility with 6 reactors, in the days following the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Okay, so it wasn't a month in, it was just a few days in. I misremembered the timeline. Each side has since regularly accused the other of shelling around the plant and risking a major nuclear mishap. Renat Kachira, an advisor to the head of Rose, oh my God, I'm just going to call it Rose, which operates Russia's nuclear network, said Ukraine planned to drop ammunition laced with nuclear waste transported from another of the country's 5 nuclear stations on the plant. So an advisor to the organization that operates Russia's nuclear network is saying that Ukraine's plan is to take ammunition laced with nuclear waste and then drop it in the power plant. Did they provide this is a why would they do it this way? Why would they do it? So is it going to just be a helicopter with a big rope, and it attaches to the ammunition and then drops it over? Is it just like a helicopter, like makes like a low flyover, hoping nobody will record, and then drops it into like the reactor? Do they fire at the plant? Because they didn't say fire at the plant. He said dropped it. So they would be dropping it. Why, if it's ammunition laced with nuclear waste, why would they drop it and not just fire it? If you're already going to be using ammunition, which means it's going to be impossible to try to make it look like an accident, why not just fire? Okay, whatever. That's their theory. Under the cover of darkness, overnight on the 5th of July, the Ukrainian military will try to attack the Zaporizhzhia station using long-range precision equipment. Okay, so we'll use long-range precision equipment. I thought it was going to drop it in. Okay. And kamikaze attack drones. Russia's news agency quoted Chara as telling Russian television he offered no evidence in support of his allegations. So they're going to drop nuclear waste, then they're going to shell it and bomb it with long-range precision equipment, and then attack it with kamikaze drones. For whatever reason, he doesn't state. Zelensky tweeted that he had told Macron in a telephone conversation that the occupation troops are preparing dangerous provocations at the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant. He said he and Macron had agreed to keep the situation under maximum control together with the IAEA, which stands for the International Atomic Energy Agency. A statement issued by the Ukrainian Armed Forces quoted operational data as saying that explosive devices had been placed on the roof of the station's 3rd and 4th reactors on Tuesday. An attack was possible in the near future. If detonated, they would not damage the reactors, but would create an image of shelling from the Ukrainian side, the statement on Telegram said. It said the Ukrainian army stood ready to act under any circumstances. Zelensky and the Ukrainian military also provided no evidence for their assertions. None of the reactors at the plant are producing electricity. In his nightly video message, Zelensky said Russia was planning to simulate an attack on the plant, or they could have some other kind of scenario. Okay, so let's move over to what Zelensky says. This goes on to like the IAEA wanting the plant demilitarized and stuff like that. This is something the IAEA has wanted for a while, and they've been unable to achieve to get the Russians to agree to demilitarize the plant. It was hard enough to get the Russians to agree to have IAEA inspectors actually visit the plant. I remember being across from the plant as the IAEA inspectors were first visiting the plant, first trying to go to the plant and trying to get permanent inspectors, which they eventually got, and them being held up at every checkpoint. It just felt like the Russians were just trying to make it difficult for him. Anyway, let's move on to what Zelensky had to say about the evidence that they said, even though they don't provide any documents, they don't provide any operational data about what the Ukrainian military is telling him, what Ukrainian intelligence is telling him, or what he's claiming is evidence of the Russians preparing a nuclear disaster at the plant. He says, now we have information from our intelligence that the Russian military has placed objects resembling explosives on the roof of several power units of the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant, perhaps to simulate an attack on the plant. Perhaps they have some other scenario, but in any case, the world can't but see that the only source of danger to the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant is Russia, no one else. By the way, when he's saying that, this is the second time they're bringing it up. They brought this up in the Reuters article, and he brought it up here. They're saying that they're placing explosives at the top of the power plant, so when they do the explosions, it would look like they were shelled. So if they put it on the roof and they explode and it causes a hole in the roof, then maybe they could point to some cameraman to aim it there, or some news person to be like, look, there's holes in the roof. That shows it was shelled. Now, I think that the damage done, though, it would still be difficult for them to prove that it was shelling by the Ukrainians, definitely if they set it up. But, I mean, so far, this is just the Ukrainian government. We don't have any videos. We don't have any photos. We don't have anything else. So far, it's just intelligence and reports on intelligence. Unfortunately, there was no timely and large-scale response to the terrorist attack on the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, and this may incite the Kremlin to commit new evil. It is the responsibility of everyone in the world to stop it. No one can stand aside as radiation affects everyone. Okay, now I'm going to do the gigantic task, it's not really a big task, of playing the Zelensky video and reading the subtitles for anybody who is too busy eating a sandwich to watch the stream. I wish you health, dear Ukrainians. I just finished a conversation with the President of France, and these are the third international negotiations today, after conversations with the NATO Secretary General and the Prime Minister of Sweden. The key is our defense, the front line, weapons, and the capabilities of our soldiers, and I am grateful to our partners for understanding our needs. We have agreed on a new defense package. And by the way, thank you, Emmanuel, for the fact that today the weapons we had agreed on, missiles and tanks, have begun to arrive. But of course, today we also talk about more strategic things, and about what would be the security foundation of Europe after this war and our victory. For peace to come sooner and to be lasting, fair, and real, the Russian evil must see the limit. We will set for the Kremlin's ambitions. We, all free European nations, all in our Euro-Atlantic community, not Russian terrorists and any of their acts of blackmail and aggression. Every day we are adding content to, wait, 1 second. We are adding content. Sorry, as a streamer, that word just, that stopped me. Every day we are adding content to the NATO summit that will take place in Vilnius next week. And I am grateful to all of our partners who are working with us to strengthen the alliance and thus to ensure security in Europe, real security. Today, in conversations with the President of France, the Prime Minister of Sweden, and the NATO Secretary General, that would be Jens Stoltenberg, we have coordinated our steps in the run-up to Vilnius, and I also have several meetings with government officials and the office's international team to prepare for foreign policy events that will take place in the near future. Very importantly, the situation at the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant. The whole world must now realize that common security depends entirely on global attention to the actions of the occupiers at the plant. Russia must clearly realize that the world sees what scenarios terrorists are preparing for, and the world is ready to respond. Radiation is a threat to everyone in the world, and the nuclear power plant must be fully protected from any radiation incidents. Today, it is exactly 16 months since the Russian troops have been in full control of the territory and facilities of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Different countries have their own intelligence and other capabilities to know exactly what is going on and who is to blame. Now we have information from our intelligence that the Russian troops have placed objects resembling explosives on the roofs of several power units of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, perhaps to simulate an attack on the plant. Perhaps they have some other scenario. But in any case, the world can't but see, that the only source of danger to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is Russia and no one else. Unfortunately, there was no timely and large-scale response to the terrorist attack on the Novokakhovka hydroelectric power plant, and this may incite the Kremlin to commit new evil. It is the responsibility of everyone in the world to stop it. No one can stand aside, as radiation affects everyone. I thank Mr. President Macron for his attention to the situation at the ZNPP, and one second. Sorry, he talks fast sometimes. And for his willingness to do everything necessary to ensure safety. One more thing. Today, Russia once again attacked the Kharkiv region. Okay, so as much as I'd like to listen to the rest of this, I do want to wrap up this segment because I want to concentrate on what he said around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Now, I want to put a few caveats here. Number one, this is intelligence from the Ukrainian government being reported from the president of Ukraine. We do not have photographs. We do not have videos. We do not have any public report that they are publishing that's like, here is all the data that shows how we got this information. And we can understand why they wouldn't publish such a report, because they don't want to lose their ability to gather information on what's going on inside the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Because if it is a possible nuclear disaster, the most important thing for the Ukrainian government is going to be keeping eyes and ears on the ground so they can follow what's happening and hopefully continue to gather evidence if the worst comes to pass, right? But we don't have any public evidence of any of the claims that they're putting forward. And so far, we have the word to go off of the Ukrainian government, and that's it. On the other end of the equation, we have the Russian government, which are making their own claims about the Ukrainians preparing their own attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, that they're going to shell it and they're going to blow it up, and they're going to destroy it. While the Ukrainians are saying that in the Russian plan to destroy the power plant, they're going to attempt to make it look like the Ukrainians shelled it. And they're going to achieve this by placing explosives on the top of the power plant. Now, neither side has yet to provide any like physical, photographic, or video evidence of this. What we do have, though, is to go off the Novokakhovka Dam explosion and how those events played out in that almost certainly man-made disaster. And we also have Russia's history of behavior at the Novokakhovka, not the Novokakhovka Dam, but I mean, we could bring that in as well, at the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant. Outside of the original battle, the Russians have stored weapons and personnel at the plant. In the early days of the war, there was a video that surfaced of plant personnel recording on their phone Russian military trucks that were stuffed into the plant. And then IAEA directors and inspectors came later, inspected the power plant, and it was still there. The military trucks were still in the facility. They were no longer filled with weapons. If they were filled with weapons at the time, we still don't know. But the military trucks were still there. The plant staff, the plant inspectors from the IAEA says that not only do they have mines scattered around the plant, but they also have mines within the plant, within the facility, even if those mines and explosives have not been planted in order to cause a nuclear incident. We also have Russia's history of lying about incidents like this. So whether or not we should trust the Russian government's word, we can also look at their history of repeated behavior in, committing an act of terrorism, whether it be the drama theater or any of the other incidents, and in denying they were doing it the whole time and denying they had any involvement afterwards. Look, we're in a very unsure period right now, with both the Russians and the Ukrainians both claiming that the other side is preparing to start an incident at the power plant. And we could get into a discussion about whether or not it would benefit one side more than the other, whether or not the Ukrainian government would want to cause that amount of untold economic devastation on their own country, that much of radiological damage on their own country, and make it difficult for their own soldiers to conduct an offensive in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast with the threat of radiation poisoning. The strategic stuff, I'm not an expert in it. I'll leave that to someone else, but I am skeptical of what I guess radiological bonus that the Ukrainians could possibly think this could give to their boost to their soldiers if they're trying to conduct an offensive. What I do want to concentrate on is the fact that this is the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. The amount of IAEA inspectors, permanent inspectors at the plant, should double, definitely considering the statements from both governments and considering that evidence from the Novokakhovka, I'm sorry, I keep saying considering over and over. I keep repeating myself. And the evidence of the Novokakhovka Dam explosion being man-made, that gives good reason to want to double the amount of inspectors, not only because of the claims from both the Russian and Ukrainian governments, but also because there is a decent amount of evidence pointing to the fact that man-made disasters in Ukraine have happened before. Namely, as Zelensky mentions in his speech, the Novokakhovka Dam explosion. So my advice is the same advice I had before. There needs to be more IAEA inspectors. There needs to be a cohesive message from the international community that any man-made disaster at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant should be considered a break of the nuclear taboo to try to purposely cause a nuclear accident, a type of nuclear terrorism in this way would be a break of the nuclear taboo and would come with an overwhelming response from the international community. So far, though, that type of message has been faint from the international community. I've seen some politicians independently say it, or one government official or another government official saying it, but most of the community seemingly doesn't even want to entertain the idea of something like this happening. But with both governments, the Russian and Ukrainian government, warning of something happening soon, it's very ominous. And my friend before he went to bed today, he was wishing me luck for today's stream. He was saying, okay, good luck with your stream or whatever. And then he said, wake me up if the Russians blow up the power plant. That wasn't a good feeling. Wasn't a good feeling. Anyway, I'm going to continue to try to, monitor the situation, continue to wait for any more updates about the power plant. But right now, we're all just kind of waiting and hoping that the worst doesn't come to pass. I say it's time to start flying B-52 bombers 24 hours a day. I do not agree with that. What's this? Dog Proton, what's this? If you're curious as to how Ukrainians are reacting to a possible nuclear threat hanging over the country, the meme du jour is this photo of a dog that looks like the famous demining dog Pes Patron, but in a hazmat suit with the words Pes Patron written on top. Oh, god damn, man. Dude, I swear to God, that message I heard from Ukrainian earlier during this war, and I know they must have gotten it from a video game, because I looked it up and I think they did get it from a video game. But when I asked them, what do you think of the idea of a nuclear war over Ukraine, of the Russians possibly nuking Ukraine? And the response I got was, Ukraine will have its borders, even if it's the last borders humanity ever draws. Oof. Grabbed me. Causing radiation to leak into other countries should be considered an attack on those countries and trigger Article 5. Well, I mean, whether that should or not be the case, whether that would be the case or not, I think is pretty sketchy. This wouldn't even be the first time something like this has happened. Now, I mean, this specifically, it would be the first time something like this has happened. But the idea of radiological spillover in Europe, that's happened before. Chernobyl was it actually happened in Ukraine before, even if the circumstances were obviously different. And this would be a lot more purposeful. And while Chernobyl was a man-made disaster, this would be a man-made disaster designed to be a disaster, and not just incompetence and Soviet bureaucracy just looking the other way and trying to cover up their own fuck-ups and mistakes as they try to do corner cutting. The international community at this point should simply demand Russia to leave the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant and have it managed by a third neutral party until the war ends. I would agree with that. That's a good recommendation. Yes, I agree with that. And the IAEA has asked for this before, but they just keep getting denied. Man, this meme is dark, isn't it? This is a good meme though. I'm keeping it in this tab.